Okay, good evening. This is Ken Kraetzer for CaMMVets Media. We cover cadets, midshipmen, the military, and veterans. And going to have a August training camp huddle, and got Richard Miller with us. And I think we've got another one of our regulars joining us. And Richard, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Ken. How are you? Getting a couple more weeks till the start of another Army football season.
Yeah, just
Looking
down
forward to it.
to barely 10 days now to the opener down at Louisiana Monroe. And it looks like we have, is that Steve Shalhoub joining us?
Let's see.
See if he can get set. He'll join us in a minute. And, but I just got off the post-practice media call and talked with Cole McCutcheon, who's a senior long snapper, number 67 from Richmond, Virginia. He said, they do about 40 snaps in practice every day, and he's going to be doing the place kick snaps on PATs and field goals. And we'll watch and he works a lot with Billy Belkey. And so he's getting the chance now as a senior to be able to play and do the long snaps. Number 67. We also talked to Trey Sophia, an outside linebacker, number 91. He's got in 11 games last year, and talked a little bit about stopping the run from his outside linebacker position. And we talked a little bit also with another outside linebacker, a senior, number 49, Jackson Powell, from Buford, Georgia. And he got into 12 games last year, and of course is the brother of Dean Powell, who's an offensive lineman for Army, graduated a year ago. He said he's down at infantry basic course, which is a real challenge. I can only imagine. And it looks like we have Steve Shalhoub joining us. Is that right?
That is correct.
Steve, good to see you. How's your summer been going?
Been okay. A lot of stuff
Hey,
going on. How's
Okay.
it going?
Yeah, so glad to have you back with us, and hopefully Sam Houston will be back with us shortly. I was saying I just got off the post-practice media call with Cole McCutcheon and with Trey Sophia and Jackson Powell. And so it's interesting. What's your thought overall, Steve, on the implementation of this new offense from Coach Drew Thatcher and company?
Yeah, interesting. Had a good conversation with Coach Thatcher in the middle of July. Spent some time with him and talked a little bit about the offense. And I mean, they're really excited about the opportunity that it brings. We've got an offensive line for the first time in, I think, in Army history. We got 10 or 11 linemen that are over 300 pounds. They've done a lot of work on getting their bodies and ready for the rigors of more pass blocking, holding the block just a little bit longer because the offense is going to start 5 yards in the backfield rather than being under center. So it'll be interesting. I mean, we've got a really tough schedule this year. I think we've got a couple games up front that we can get some timing down and get some real life experience against Louisiana Monroe and then into Delaware State. And then we get a little bit more into the teeth of the schedule. But it'll be interesting to see whether or not, my biggest question that I had to Drew Thatcher and to the quarterbacks coach when I saw them that weekend was, what do we do on 3rd and 2? That used to be, we were on schedule. That was a Buchanan moment, right? But where, 3rd and 2 is 3rd and 7 because we're 5 yards in the backfield. Can we hold that block a little bit longer and get that 2 yards? So I'll be interested to see, what we do on the short yardage. Are we going to be as aggressive on 4th down? And what is it looking like? And how do we stay on schedule?
Well, we saw the scrimmage on Saturday at Mikey Stadium, and even Coach Munkin said it was a day where they wanted to get back to practicing their running plays. There was quite a few option plays. We saw Tyson Riley in the backfield doing some dives, but also doing some moves to the outside, and really the same for Jacoby Buchanan. It's still reassuring to have two big fullbacks like that you can go to on short yardage.
Yeah, and from what I'm hearing, they may have lost a couple pounds too. So and they're going to be a little bit quicker. It's just a different mentality to go to the shotgun versus having under center, and they haven't eliminated that they're going to be under center sometimes. So, but it'll be interesting. I'm looking. We've been practicing against Army, so we're Army against Army. It'll be interesting to see when we get against a different colored uniform and somebody who hasn't had a chance to prepare for us, and just to see whether or not, teams are going to be a little bit better prepared because we're not looking as unique as we have been in the past, where, running the wishbone and those type of things. It's going to be a little bit more of an RPO situation. Are they a little bit more prepared because more offenses are like that out there? So we'll see. But I'm sure Coach will have them ready to go, and they'll be prepared. But it's just how do we line up against another team? It's going to be interesting to watch.
Yeah, and the key question we've been asking is the quarterback situation, which we might say is a little bit thin, but got Bryson Daly, who got some experience in last year in a few situations, got all spring, and but then the loss of Alex Meredith last week with a season-ending injury really affected their their depth. When you lose your number 2 and everybody else hasn't played, I thought Dwayne Coleman has played well, and Larry Robinson, the freshman from Detroit, number 2, has played well. Champ Harris, I thought it's been a little bit up and down, and Zach Mundell, who Coach Munkin would love to see get a shot, has been hurt and hasn't gotten many reps in. What do you think about the quarterback situation?
I think from everything I'm hearing, we've got some talented new guys that are coming in, but you're still a freshman quarterback in a Division I program, and there's going to be some getting used to the game speed and the tempo of what's going on. So I mean, I would lend ourselves to a more experienced quarterback coming out of the gate, maybe sprinkling some youth in there. And I think with the way that the offense is going to be, we're not going to have a choice. We're going to have to end up with, a quarterback's going to get dinged up along the way, and somebody's going to have to step in. And freshman quarterbacks at Army have, they've shined in the past. So they'll find a way to step up and do what's good for the team. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how these quarterbacks are going to react to having a little bit more airing it out and what it looks like, because we are going to be young. But I think, I don't want to say that we are actually looking to burn a year, but I think that this is the year, with the schedule we have and everything else going on, that this is the year to kind of get our feet up underneath us, because that schedule is brutal this year.
And key is, I think, for Bryson Daly to stay healthy and not be like it's been the past couple of years where Army's used 3 quarterbacks in a game, mainly due to injury. But I think they will try to get Dwayne Coleman, some experience, and maybe Larry Robinson. He's looked pretty poised, I would say, in watching him on 2 scrimmages, that he could, handle himself if need be. But then you're going against, you got 3 Power 5 teams coming up in 4 weeks, and was it Troy, who's very close to the same level. It's going to be quite a stretch. So we'll see. Any thoughts about how the defense is stacking up, Steve?
It's been it's interesting, with the exception of Lowen, right? I mean, it's been a long time since we've had a no-name defense like this. I mean, there are a lot of new, fresh faces that, we're not getting the same name recognition of players that have been going 3-4 years starting. So, and I think that's as you look at a healthy program, when you're playing a lot of freshmen, sophomores, you're either recruiting really, really well, or you're filling gaps with players that are not ready to be there yet because we have a big hole in the program. So, usually when you have a healthy Army football team, you're breaking into the starting ranks as a junior, and then you're playing a lot as a senior, freshman and sophomore year. You're special teaming it, and you're getting some playing time and mop up and maybe a backup role, but you're really getting your reps and cutting your teeth, and then it's next man up. And I'm seeing a lot more of that on the defense this year. So we'll see how they gel and come together. Got the utmost confidence in the D coordinator for sure. So I think they'll have them prepared, but this is it's a unique year because there are not a lot of no names on that defense.
Well, we don't, Markel Broughton's graduated out with the Broncos, and Andre Carter, we're just watching his stats. He's getting some playing opportunities with the Vikings. But that's, when you lose two, and Wabena Bonzo also has had an NFL opportunity. You lose 3 NFL players from your defense. That's a lot to lose in 1 year.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
And, we do have, Army does have a couple of guys, some 5th-year players that may help them. Coach Munkin has mentioned that. I was looking for one player in particular, but I guess everyone's asking about Tyrell Robinson. And unfortunately, Coach Munkin said on Saturday, he is not ready to take reps in practice. And so obviously can't get in a game, but they think that at some point into the season, Tyrell Robinson will have recovered from the serious leg injury he had last year and be ready to contribute. And he's certainly a playmaker for the offense.
Yeah, again, that injury was horrific, and there's the physical side of it, and then there's the mental side of it. So he can be ready to go, and then until he gets that first hit or he gets that first personal roll up on his knee, for him to get up, pop up, and then brush himself off to get that confidence back in his wheels underneath him. It's going to take some time. You just don't come back from something that difficult and jump right back into the saddle on that. So I mean, we've got to I think we've got to play with the players we've got, and if he can provide some quality reps towards the Air Force game or a little bit prior to that, that would be awesome. But I mean, I think we ought to have the mindset that we need to bring the next man up.
Yeah, let's see if we can bring up Coach Munkin a little bit of our talk on Saturday, and see if we can bring up some of our talks from this year. And let's hear a little bit of our talk last week. Okay, and that is Army coach Jeff Monken. We had a chance to visit last week, also after the seminar, after the practice, the scrimmage on Saturday. And Steve, what is your thought? One of the things in the new offense is that it's new terminology and a new cadence for the players to get used to. How much of an impact is that for the players to get used to a new system and new terminology from the quarterbacks and also the signals in the huddle?
They've had enough time really from spring ball to now to get that terminology down. It doesn't take much for that. I mean, I would be more, the technique is the thing that I'd be more worried about. It's not like the terminology isn't going to a West Coast offense type terminology. It is still relatively, I've heard some of the play calls and the terminology is still relatively short and concise. So they'll be prepared on that portion of it. I don't think the mental error portion of it will be tough. These are the brightest kids on the planet playing football. So, but the footwork and the getting to the spots and the timing and all the rest of the stuff, that'll take some time. That just takes reps.
Very good. And Coach Monken talked about trying to bring the team healthy to the start of the season. When I was up at practice last week, one of the offensive linemen, I wasn't sure who it was down on the ground for a few moments. So there's sort of a balance between getting the team ready for the physical aspects of football, blocking, tackling. They put Bryson Daly in without his red shirt for a while on Saturday when they were doing some goal line situations. They wanted him to take a few hits to get used to it. Where is that balance you find between, getting used to the physical nature of football, but trying to keep players from getting hurt?
There is no balance, unfortunately, when it comes to Army. There is there is no substitute for going full speed. We just don't have the talented group of players that other programs are going to have. And our depth isn't as deep either. So, it's a double-edged sword where we need to be razor sharp in reference to our timing and execution. And the only real way to do that is full speed. But then if we get dinged up, then we're not deep at any one position. So it's a double-edged sword. And coach goes at it hard. He does, and he probably goes harder than any other program in Division I football. And that has a price. It has a price to pay for, the ankles and the knees and the dings that we get during the season. But the other side of it is if you look at the way that Navy opened up against BYU a couple of years ago.
I remember that.
Yeah, they didn't hit it all. And they just looked way out of their skin and looked way outmatched. So that's the other side of this, right? So, it's the devil that you versus the devil you don't. And you're putting in a new offense. You're only going to be able to sharpen that steel at full speed. And if you don't do it, then who knows what you have. So, I mean, he's got to go at it.
Absolutely. Now we've got Richard Miller with us, our producer director, always getting me ready for these shows. Richard, I know you've been following a lot of things that are going on in college football. What story has stood out to you this summer about so many things happening in college football?
Well, one story that has really stood out to me, which I have been following lately, is Jim Harbaugh, the Michigan Wolverines head coach, at his alma mater. Now, like it was reported yesterday, the self-imposed 3-game ban, which was supposed to begin during the 2023 season, for alleged violations during the COVID-19 dead period. Now, that means dead period would mean, I guess, when they're not doing a lot of practices or. because
Yeah.
of the COVID violations.
Yeah.
Harbaugh quote said in the statement, "I will continue to do what I always tell my players and my kids at him. Don't get better, get better." He's gonna miss games against East Carolina, the UNLV Running Rebels, and Bowling Green. And will
Okay,
be
so
coming back.
they're kind of early season games. Steve, any thoughts? I mean, you would think Michigan would be able to manage their recruiting process and when they can talk to players and recruits and when they cannot. Any thoughts on that one?
It's a big bunch of hullabaloo. It really is. Right now, number one, you're self-imposing this for 3 games that are scrimmages for the most part, right? So, he's not taking himself out of the conference schedule, and he's kind of hoping that he's bowing down or kneeling to the NCAA so they don't get any. You're punishing yourself so that you can determine the games you want to go without all that stuff. That's one side of it. But number 2, the hypocrisy of the whole thing is there's tampering going on all the time now with NIL money in the transfer portal. You've got coaches that are enticing players that are on other rosters to come over and we'll get you money. So there's a huge coming to Jesus situation for the NCAA that we've got to get this under control, because what Harbaugh did allegedly during that time pales in comparison to some of the things that are going on with the transfer portal and wooing players before they're even away from their team to come play for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there's a double standard here that needs to get fixed pretty quickly.
Yeah, and then you have the situation going on. I know Richard's going to get to it. The Pac-12 apparently, is dissolved with Washington and Oregon going to the Big Ten, and Colorado going to the Big 12, and Arizona State. And Arizona, you really need a scorecard to figure out where everybody's going to. But Pac-12 may try to draw some teams from the Mountain West Conference, and then you've got Stanford and Cal, 2 of the finest educational schools in the country, prominent in athletics, with not an assured future. What was your thoughts, Steve, on all that's happened with the Pac-12 breaking up?
It's my thought is, it's a harbinger of things to come. This is only the first domino to fall. I think the ACC is not far behind. So what does this look like 2 or 3 years from now is what I'm trying to figure out what the end result is going to be. But it's there's a lot of gamesmanship going on where teams are bowing out of conferences and they're coming back out, and it's getting very difficult, and it'll be interesting to see if we end up with 2 premier conferences and then there are some other satellite conferences or groupings of teams, and they've shown Army being with Air Force, Army, Navy, possibly Notre Dame, as this independent group that gets to go around and play. Do we end up in a conference of regional Syracuse's, is there a grouping there of the UConns of the world that we are part of? It's going to be interesting. We've kind of shied away from conferences, but we may not have a choice.
Yeah. Steve, how tough is it for Mike Buddy and folks to schedule games for Army at this point? I know it's tougher in the second half of the year when you have conference games being played predominantly, but Army is always an attractive opponent. Is scheduling a concern that at this point for Army?
I think yes and no, right? The yes portion of it is the flux of things that are happening in realignment. And, these schedules are not made, this is not high school where we're making the schedule for the next year or 2 years out. These are going out 10 years, 12 years. So we don't have a crystal ball to be able to really look at what we're doing with that. So, a Syracuse or an Oklahoma that we have on a slate in the future, that may change. We it may not work out scheduling wise that we can even play them during the time that we're figuring to play them in the future. So that means we got to patch those games with other regional and travel wise, it's gotten really, really difficult with aircraft and chartering and everything else, that we're trying to stay more regionalized unless it's a big payday. So the games that we're having with the Syracuse and the games we're having with the UConns and the UMasses and things that we don't have to go as far, it makes a lot of sense for a program to do. Whoever's in that job, and that job used to be, covered, and heck, his name just flew out of my mind. He's up at Lemoyne.
Bob Beretta.
Bob Beretta. That was his job, and I love talking with him about the ins and outs of that, of what goes on with setting the schedule. Now, on the other side, where it got easier, is that teams didn't want to. A la Tennessee, they don't want to play an option team coming off of a conference opponent going into a conference opponent, right? They don't want to, squeeze in an Army in between. With the offense we're running, we became a little bit more attractive for them to bring us in, because it's not as difficult to defend as the wishbone or the option, the true triple option was. Even though I'll debate all day long, we haven't run the triple option since I played. But so I think we're a little bit more manageable in their minds to put us on the schedule, because we look a little bit more like other Division I teams.
Okay. And Steve, I think maybe a final thought. I read something that the president of the NCAA was commenting on with the conference realignment and travel for teams. There's also this other big elephant in the room called the NCAA basketball tournament, which is an absolute huge fun generator for, almost every school. For over 300 schools get some piece of the NCAA money. And you have teams, smaller schools like Iona, which we cover, gave UConn a big game in the NCAA tournament. But would that continue if you have a football environment with two conferences dominating? And could the NCAA, could those schools say, well, why don't they do their own basketball tournament? Any thoughts about the factor of basketball, and also what the NCAA is thinking about even going to Congress and saying Congress needs to present some oversight?
Well, the last thing we want to do to straighten anything out is to get the government involved. So, that's first and foremost. If you can, well, I don't want to get political. Anyway, moving on. The key to the whole thing is, I think you got to separate teams from conferences, from football and basketball. And does this happen? Does conference alignment or alignment happen for basketball, independent of where the football teams are playing? Because the thought of, flying out on a Tuesday from USC to go and play in Georgia makes no sense, right?
For one Wednesday night, and then travel back.
Yeah, and travel back. It's different because you're playing so many more games. So if you're in a conference, if Texas or you got to figure that out. Rutgers against USC, it just doesn't work. So I think you got to separate those and regionalize it, and come up with your own conferences at that point in time. But I think there's a lot of money to be made on that side of it too, with basketball television deals that you could bring forth, right? You're doubling the number of, the television deals and the access with that at that point. So, I mean, I think that there's a way that they can make that all work and still keep the continuity of the tournament in some shape or form. But they're, it's, I mean, call me wacky crazy. I think the NCAA is going to implode. I mean, what use do we have of the NCAA governing body at this point? I mean, what are they doing?
Well, they've lost all influence in Power 5 football, but there's everybody else: Division II, Division III, Division I AA. The football championship, subdivision teams, 100 and some odd of those to take care of. And look how Army and Navy do real well playing most of their sports non-football in the Patriot League, which is almost every school's within a 3 or 4 hour bus ride, and a lot to be said for that. So I think of Dave Gavitt, who put the Big East together, and then they tried to put a football league together, and then all those schools left when BC and Syracuse and Pittsburgh left. Would some of those schools like to come back?
I would say no. I mean, no. I mean, it's just the funding of, the funding that's going with these conferences and the television deals are just, it's too lucrative for them to want to come back. I mean, if you think about it, there are really, most schools only have 1 or 2 programs that are making any money to support the other teams. So, I mean, you're so dependent upon the television revenue of a CBS for football or CBS for Saturday afternoon basketball that you've got to chase that dollar.
Okay. Steve, we're 10 days from the start of the Army football season. Army's going to travel down to Louisiana Monroe. What's your thought? As Army will get set, they'll announce their 2-deep roster on Sunday or Monday. And Bryson Daly looks like he's going to start at quarterback for the Black Knights in the opener. Any quick thoughts on the start of the season in 10 days?
I think coming out of the gate, the keys on offense to be looking at is, tempo and execution, and then also turnovers. And I mean, I think turnovers are a big part of execution. So we're a much better ball club when we're not putting the ball in the turf. And I think one of the reasons why we were so conservative is that we didn't want to put the ball in the turf. That's why we didn't pitch the ball very much, because turnovers are going to win football games. Sure. If you look at the Navy game last year, we couldn't run up a bar tab, but we did have a couple of key turnovers with a block punt, and it made the difference in that ball game. So, just got to look at their efficiency on offense and the tempo and how do they, the critical change situations and those third down situations. We'll see how we execute on that. A team makes their biggest jump between their first and second game. So how big of a jump do we have to make? Is it huge, or is it, a good sized jump, but it's more fine tuning? So that first game coming out of the gate is going to be super important. But by the time we get to Delaware State, we've got to be really sharpening our knives and getting ready for the meat of our season, and see if we can't chip or, steal one from a Syracuse or an LSU or even a Boston College. It's got to be an interesting year for sure, but it's just how crisp can we be and how can we come out of the gate? Now in defense, it's got to be, I was uniquely surprised at how out of shape we seemed last year in Coastal Carolina. Now it was a warm day, it was a humid day. I was there, and I get it, but I didn't expect how winded we were, especially on the defensive line. So how did we come out of camp this year? We're going to Louisiana. I mean, that's no easier than Coastal. And how do we, do we win the conditioning battle? And we always usually did. And do we come out of the gate with that? Because, you know, defense usually comes out of the season early in a better state than the offense, because offense is so executed. It's such an execution portion of it, and it takes longer to get your timing down. But defense is reckless abandon, so you can be a little bit better on defense. So are we going to win the conditioning battle? Are we going to swarm the football? And are we going to create some turnovers? If we do those things, we'll stay in games early. And then can we execute on offense? That's what I'm looking at.
Okay. And Steve Shalhoub, thanks so much for joining us in the class of 1992. And Richard Miller, final thought, as we're a week away from the start of the Army football season.
My final thought is Army has to be, as Steve said, Army has to work on the execution of their plays and of course the toughness of the early schedule not being as smooth as it is, as you see.
Okay.
Louisiana Monroe, Delaware State, and UTSA, 3 tough games, tough schedule, but it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a challenge. But I want to thank Richard Miller for joining us today, and also Steve Shalhoub. So glad he was able to join us on very short notice as we set up it's actually our second huddle. Richard and I did one a couple of weeks ago. But Steve, thank you. We'll look forward to talking hopefully next week as we get set for the opener at Louisiana Monroe. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for watching, everyone watching CaMMVetsMedia. We cover cadets, midshipmen, veterans, military, proudly since 2008. And if any organization there would like to be a partner with us, we'd sure like to talk to you about that. Help us cover more of Army football. And so call tonight, and thanks for everybody joining us tonight as we start out our Army football season. So glad to be able to do this. Have a good evening. Thanks for watching.